Oakford Archaeology, who are leading on our dig today up at Bolttail. We've been here all week and we're just going to have a little show of what we've found. So Mark, what's this that we found here?
So we've had some really interesting developments this week. So we focused on the bank, which is just overlooking us to our right, and then right in front of us here, this deep hole is the main ditch of the Iron Age promontory fort. So we've got the really nice, sharp and well-defined rock cut outer edge of the ditch. You can then see the fill with huge quantities of stone, which at the moment we're interpreting as the former revetment of the earth bank, and which following the abandonment of the fort has kind of slumped and filled in this ditch. So this is very exciting. Unfortunately, because of the scale of the bank, our excavations aren't quite as extensive as we would like them to be as kind of health and safety risks. So we're having to do a lot of all of our recording from up here. We are hoping, once we've done some limited backfilling next week, to investigate the relationship between the bank, the slumping and the ditch in more detail. But that will have to wait for next week when the weather hopefully improves. So, and then behind me, you can see we're doing some more excavations and some more explorations. We were hoping to find a second ditch, an outer ditch to the Iron Age camp. Unfortunately, it's looking not all that promising at the moment. It's quite shallow, not very ditch-like, but perhaps just some limited excavations in the Iron Age to create more material for this huge and impressive bank that you see to our right.
And just down here behind you was where we found the pottery yesterday. Can you tell us a bit about what that pottery was?
Yeah, so that's very exciting. Initially, when we first found it, we thought it might be Iron Age, kind of contemporary with the construction of the promontory hillfort. But on balance, having looked at it again, our pottery specialist, Marc Steinmetzer, thinks that it might be black burnish ware. So a type of pottery that comes in the 1st century AD, following the arrival of the Romans, and continues in use all the way through to the 4th and early 5th century. So we found it quite high up in the sequence after these ditches. So I think we found it just there.
Yeah.
After the ditch has already at least partially filled in. So we're thinking perhaps we're looking at kind of continued occupation into the into the Roman period and into perhaps the early post-Roman period, which is very exciting. At a time when there's a lot of trade going on in Bantham Ham, for example, and yeah, so we're seeing perhaps seasonal or continuous occupation of the site into that period, which is very exciting. So yeah, we're just a little bit of a snippet and insight into the continued use and history of this monument.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll just have a little look right up the ditch. Like you say, it's really impressive size of it. So we'll go further up the ditch and you can have. Okay, so we're further up the ditch now, and do you want to tell us a little bit about what we found here?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. We found natural geology just in front of me here, the kind of more yellowy material and the solid bedrock. So that's the top of the original slope. And so as we look down the hill back towards the ditch and volunteers are excavating, you can kind of, if you trace in your mind's eye a line between us and those buckets, you can kind of get a feel for how much of the natural slope has been cut away to kind of create this massive bank that is behind us that we're kind of sat on and accentuate the defences of the Iron Age promontory hillfort. It's a huge investment in time and labour and in people for a small tribal community at the time.
Why do you think they would have had a hillfort here?
It's a perfect location. You know, it's just stunning views. You've got rich fishing grounds. Probably the agricultural land to the north of us is incredibly fertile. Trade links, possibly already during the Iron Age locally and perhaps further afield. So yeah, it's a easily defensible location. You know, all it takes is a couple of ditches and a huge earth bank.
And a few people.
And a few people. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know very little to nothing about how much time it would have taken to create this, whether this was the work of a single season or several, whether this was a small local gathering or a much larger kind of tribal kind of coming together. So many questions that we perhaps might never have the answer to, really. But
So
yeah.
hopefully we find out a little bit more about how these are made this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate. So we've got the natural ground. Everything else behind us is made up, spoiled from the excavation of the ditch or ditches in front of us, and you can see these layers of soil and stone and rock kind of falling back. And what we've realised looking at the infilling of the ditch is that probably would have been some form of stone revetment, perhaps not a wall per se, perhaps more of a dry stone wall. It might not have been visible, it may always have been covered in turf, but some solid structure at the front here to retain the weight of the earth bank. And what we then see following the end of the occupation, the abandonment of the site, is that through natural weathering, perhaps deliberately, falls down the slope and into the ditch at the foot. So, that's very exciting too. It also means that, judging by the amount of spoil that fills the ditch, this earth bank, which is already very impressive, would have been much more impressive yet.
And you can see lots of layers in the soil here, so is that where they would have piled up over different times?
Yeah, so if you kind of imagine a stone revetment at the front, they would have piled against the base of it. You can see it kind of falling back, quite large kind of layers. You've got a layer of stone behind us, which we'll come to in a minute. Some of these soily deposits go underneath it. So what's also starting to come to light is that we think the bank shows multiple phases of construction. So we think at the moment there's possibly 3. So there's the initial one with the revetment, perhaps just a very soily earth bank behind. And then the stone that you see at the back is about 1/2 metre to 1 metre above those early deposits and seems to revet the back of it, the kind of the core, a higher core at the heart, like perhaps a widening and a strengthening, a heightening of the initial smaller earth bank. What you see also here is that following the collapse of the revetment at the front and the collapse of the core of the bank, this stone revetment falls in and over itself. So archaeology in action, I guess. And then what you can see at the rear of our excavations is a second dump of stone. And what we think is happening here, we've got the initial first phase earth bank, a secondary strengthening, and then a third tertiary, a widening and again heightening of the bank to make it an even more impressive structure. So 3 phases we think at the moment of changes and alterations, which is very exciting.
Brilliant, thank you so much.